Well, hello everyone. So good to see you all here on our Dynamics GP year-end webinar coming to you live from SA Global. I have my colleague John Kirsch here with me. We'll do some intros here in a minute. Sit back, relax. We're going to talk about all kinds of cool things for Dynamics GP year-end tips and tricks. It's that time of year already. That hard time right between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We know you love nothing more than spending a few minutes with us, reminding us of how to process GP year end. So let's get into it. So, as I mentioned, we're here to talk about the latest and greatest information on Dynamics GP, a little bit about the roadmap. We're going to talk about how to get ready for year end, and we're going to go through some year end tips and tricks, how to make sure your year end goes as smoothly as possible. We'll get into that here in just a minute. My name is Sean Dorward. I'm the Vice President of Delivery here, Service Delivery here at SA Global. I work with John Kirsch, who's going to be doing all the hard stuff on the webinar here today. I see a lot of the names on the call here on the webinar. I do recognize some existing clients. Thank you so very much. Appreciate your trust and support, and some folks who we met at Dynamics Community Summit in October, and some other folks we've known for quite some time. I do oversee our GP team and our NAV or Business Central team. I am a longtime community contributor. I love giving my thoughts and tips and tricks or life hacks, as you may have seen, about GP and Business Central, Excel especially. I love doing Excel. Enough about me. Let's talk just a little bit about SA Global. SA Global is an international or global Microsoft partner. We service and support all of the Microsoft stack, including Azure, that fancy schmancy co-pilot. That's certainly in our purview. Dynamics GP, one of the products near and dear to our hearts, without a doubt here, especially here in North America. We are an 11-time winner of the Microsoft Partner of the Year Award, which is an incredible thing to be able to say about the folks that I get the privilege to work with. It's not a surprise when you get to know them why we receive that accolade so many times. Quite talented folks. We are in 25 different countries with over 800,000 Microsoft seats in our customer base. And long story short, it's what we do, it's what we love. We're quite passionate about it, so much that most of us, our average tenure is about 15 years plus. John's been doing this since 1927, and we have folks who our business has been around for 32 years. Last but not least, before I introduce John, we are the recipient of the 2023-2024 Microsoft Inner Circle. That is a unique accolade to receive for just the top 10% of all Microsoft partners around the globe. So quite proud of that. We hope to see you at Dynamics Con in May. We're active participants there as well. Without further ado, I will turn it over to John so he can take a minute to introduce himself, and we'll get into Dynamics GP.
All right, thanks, Sean. Welcome, everybody. Like Sean said, I've been watching kind of the names as everybody's been rolling in here too. So great to see so many names. Can't quite share everybody's camera, but yeah, good to connect however we can here. Certainly a lot of folks that we don't work with right now too on the list. So happy to welcome you all too, and we'll jump in here. So yeah, just a little bit about me. I am the GP product lead here, as Sean mentioned. We have similar type background here. I think he said almost 24. I put 24 plus, so we just like to mix it up a little bit. But been working with GP for a really long time here, going back into the 90s. So yeah, there's contact information. You will get the slides after. So you know, anything that you see in here, certainly make some notes if you want to, but you will get that after, so you can get the contact links here and stuff like that. I do like to squeeze in a little other blurb here when I can. So I'm actually the vice president at Golden House, actually a few weeks away from becoming the president. It's a nonprofit organization here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I'm based, that deals with domestic violence. And so it's been a nonprofit that I've invested a lot of time and energy into, and one that unfortunately is needed all over. So I put a little plug in there. If you're looking for something to get involved with, I'm sure there's a local one that could use it. Otherwise, I appreciate everybody that's involved. Just, you know, a ton of different interests and things like that. So, you know, it's great to give back to the community.
Yeah, John.
Right.
quite remarkable. Every time you mention it, I'm just so proud to know you and to work with you for the kind of support that you give to your community in that way. So thank you. I'm sure that is shared by the folks in the webinar today. Thank you very much for that. Before you continue on into the roadmap, I just want to remind folks, I'm going to be here. I'm going to turn my camera off so we can focus in on the slides as John goes through them, but I will be here monitoring the chat. Please ask questions. I'll communicate them to John, maybe chime in where I can. But be sure to put them in there or reach out to us. As John mentioned, you'll get the slides and the recording later. So take it away.
All right, thanks. Yeah, and I share the picture of my family because I mentioned like all my interests are whatever the kids want to do. Because when you have 5 kids, you don't get much choice on your own. But all joking aside, it's great. I love it. And yeah, let's jump in. Enough about me. All right, so I'm going to also turn my camera off here, and we'll allow the full screen and not be in the way here, and be able to focus on the content here. So, excuse me, we wanted to start out here and just give a little update about the GP product roadmap and support and things like that. There's certainly a lot of messages that are out there in the community, some great and accurate, and also some that are misleading, to be honest. So we want to make sure you're getting that information, that you have the facts, and be able to work forward from there. So the main thing here for those existing clients, like pretty much everybody is that GP is on the modern support lifecycle for Microsoft, and that means that we get multiple updates. I'll kind of talk about that in the next couple of slides, but it's continued to be enhanced and supported. You can see the roadmap on the right-hand side, which is right off the Microsoft website, which is supported and released from 2028 and beyond. So again, I know there's messages out in the marketplace saying that it's ending and end of life and things like that. One of those goes to the fourth point there. There are some changes coming up with new sales. So Microsoft did announce earlier in the year that they're not going to be selling new licenses of GP, perpetual or the on-prem starting in 25, and then subscription in 26. So that is the case if you don't own it right now, which again, if everybody on this webinar owns it right now, there is no changes. You can continue to add new users, add new modules if you want to. There's no changes that affect existing customers. The only other kind of existing customer, as I jump around the bullet point order here, is the second one there. If you haven't received a renewal and you're a little bit later or coming up the first part of next year, October 1st, Microsoft increased the enhancement renewal by 1%, regardless of which plan that you were on. So that is from Microsoft. They raised that annual renewal that you pay 1%, which entitles you to your new releases and versions that we're talking about. So we do want to make sure to stay current on those. Again, new sales are not being sold after in a couple of years here, but that's really the only change affecting existing clients. So again, no end date, continued support, continued releases. So with that, we just want to reiterate the fact as well. So very simply, no confusion. Us as a company, SA Global, and whether Sean or I or some of the others on the team are completely dedicated to GP support. We're also dedicated to the whole Microsoft stack. As Sean mentioned, we support basically the whole stack from Microsoft throughout the company. But from our standpoint, GP has been a tried and true and tested system, obviously working for years and years. We've loved it. We love the ISVs and the add-ons and everything that it can do. And we have no plans to stop supporting that. So we're dedicated to that. Those looking for one of those other Microsoft options for a reason or wanting to move, we're happy to help out and go through that as well. And essentially there's no pressure. So there's a lot of different partner stances and things that are going on, some that are putting pressure, some that are kind of offering or really pushing for a change. Our standpoint is we want to support our clients and work with you as a partner and what works for you. And we don't run your business, but we're certainly there to help you. So that's our stance. For me, it can't be much more black and white, and clear on that, and it makes it really easy to work in the environment that we do. So, for those, again, that are, working with us, it is a busy time of year. We've got a lot of support requests coming in right now as people get ready for year end. So we are staying on top of those the best we can right now. and I think we're pretty good. But you know, if you are looking for support as well, if you're getting some of that pressure, if you're getting an inaccurate message like I just talked about, you know, ping one of us. Our contact information again in the slides. Let's talk about that, because we want, from just a general standpoint, we want you to be able to continue to use, you know, a software that works for you, and not be forced into changes that you don't want to. So I think a very important message that's worth a couple of minutes there. So let's jump into the year end though. So while you're here, so let's talk about the update right now. So the software update, talk a little bit about the October release as well. So 18.6 came out in October. So that's the latest release of GP, and or major kind of version release here. And one of the things I want to mention here is that we really do recommend everyone apply and update sometime every year. So if you don't need that during this year-end time, if you don't need it for any of the forms or things we're going to talk about, you know, look for a time during the year that's convenient. One of the biggest reasons, the big reason, you get all those, you know, enhancements, the new features, you get to the bug fixes and things like that. But it also keeps you within that single kind of one-hop update. And most of those are really straightforward. We've been applying them this year already, not seeing issues with those. So it allows you kind of that quick updates to be able to be applied, and not a big project for that. Microsoft is really enforcing or not testing at all going back more than a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So, you know, really we want to stay updated within a year and a half. So applying that once a year will keep you in that cycle. So if you have questions about that, again, happy to discuss that individually. To clarify or make sure everybody understands, there are 3 releases that are essentially in the life cycle that are listed. So that's the October release, which is the feature release, this year-end release that we're talking about right now, and then there's a mid-year release, usually kind of tied to the Canadian payroll release that comes out. So those are the for sure ones. If there are other urgent, you know, bug fixes or whatever, some other ones are released throughout the year as needed. So you can see down on the bottom a couple of the new features that were released in October. One we'll talk about a couple times maybe here, but the 1099 forms all have lines on them now. So regardless of which form it is, 100% of them have lines. So that makes it easier, especially if you have that small quantity to print, or you just want to keep copies internally printed on there. So nice and easy with that. This is a big one. The shared mailbox with MFA, multi-factor authentication, is now working, and I've had several clients wanting to use that, and I've worked with them on that. So that's good news there and available. And then there's a few others. We'll talk about the reverse fiscal year by company, and you can see a couple more. So there's more on the website. If you look for what's new, Dynamics GP online, you'll find the help online that has it. Excuse me. So let's talk a little bit more specifically. So if you apply the year-end update, you will get all of those new features, the 18.6 release. And that came out just before Thanksgiving here. So it's out now. We're applying. I am still validating a couple of ISVs yet to make sure they're ready to go. So if you are going to apply this yourself or talking to your partner, if it's not us, just make sure you have all those ISVs validated before you apply the update, because you certainly don't want to get updated and then find out one of them is not ready and you can't use that right now until it's done. So just want to make sure those are all ready to go. Most are there already. What's in this one? I mentioned the 1099 forms with lines that were in the October release, so you get that. There is a 1096 form change, and then the fixed asset luxury auto depreciation, which seems like every year, is part of the calculation changes in there. So you'll notice what's not on the list is payroll. There are not form changes for payroll this year, or tax code changes that need to be recalculated or changed for different calculations. So so note that not required for the payroll to be able to process year end or start processing next year, which you know, doesn't happen. It's 1 out of every, you know, from what I've seen, probably 4 or 5 years or more. So a little bit unique this year. One of the biggest news is not GP specific, but I have that kind of bolded in the middle. So the IRS is requiring 1099 electronic filing for 10 or more forms per EIN this year. So if you have 10 or more forms, there is a requirement to do that. So one of the kind of easy options that I've found. I haven't done this too much because I'm not filing them myself, but I know the IRS website does have an upload for up to 100 that you can download a CSV file. So like prepare a smart list, export it to Excel, save as a CSV and upload it. So if you need some help with that, again, certainly reach out, let us know if you need a little help with that and kind of setting up a smart list or export. Otherwise, we do need to look for a third-party solution that can do that. So we have some options around that as well. So I did share that in our year-end email that went out to our existing clients. So if you have questions on that, if you didn't get that email and are on this and want to reach out, please let me know, and we'll be sure to share that information with you. All right, so the version there, 18.6.1695, that's the exact version of the release that came out here for year end. So that is what's available right now. So I put the note on there, only available for GP 1816, so 18.6, sorry. So again, you get to the latest release when you apply that. It's not available for any of the older versions, GP 2016, 15, that's now been a couple of years. Those don't have it, so we need to get to the latest release, and that's kind of the purpose of the modern life cycle. And then for this one, this is what I mentioned before. So if you're on 18.4.1361, so that exact release or higher, you can just directly apply that. If you're on, say, one of the 18.3 versions, you would have to go to 18.4 or 5, whichever one is compatible. I think both those are, and then go to 18.6. So you'd have to do 2 hops of updates to get there. So there is a link on the bottom with information about that, more detail, but super important to understand, again, if you're gonna take that on yourself, that you've got a path that gets there and be able to successfully apply that. All right, so let's jump in. So we're gonna go through tips and tricks. We're gonna really kind of talk about each one of the modules here and try to get through this on time. So let's go reconcile to the general ledger. So we're gonna kind of start out with one of the tips here. So hopefully everybody's reconciling every month or close to that, or maybe kind of circle back to do last month here to just have December. But one of the things that, if it ever happens, like you've reconciled, usually you can find it if there's one small issue right away, or it's small enough just to maybe make an entry for it. But if we get far enough off that like we've got to find this and we we need a little bit of help, that we're not able to just kind of quickly find what that amount is, we do have this reconciled to the GL. So you can see here, looking at the inquiry compared to the trial balance, this is receivables, it does not match. So I want to point this out. You can see the path right on the screen. Again, you will get the slides after, along with the recording. So you will be able to kind of navigate back to this path and use the slides here. But under the financial series, we have the reconcile to GL. So this is available for multiple modules. So you can use this for payables, I believe fixed assets as well. You can see the drop down right here. We're on receivables though. We enter our accounts in. This one just has one if you just have one AR account, but if you have multiple, you can list all of those here. And we run the tool. So we go ahead and process that. And what we'll end up getting is an Excel file in that path that we specified there. And it comes out looking like this. It would be great if this is what it looks like when you run it, because we literally have one unmatched transaction on the top and it has the amount. So on the right-hand side, this is on the general ledger. And on the left-hand side, we have the receivables transaction. So looking at the subledger here, and you can see it's missing here. It's over on the GL. That's the amount we were off by, and we can quickly tie that out. So, it looks like somebody made a GL entry and probably shouldn't have to that account. So that's what this unmatched transactions on the top is here. Those are, it can't see it in the subledger and GL for the accounts that we picked. Potentially matched is some of the linking behind the system might not be there, like the originating document numbers don't match on both sides, like we kind of see in the bottom where it is matched. So maybe something didn't match up there, but the dollar amount matched exactly. So GP is kind of smart enough there to say, okay, it doesn't match on the document numbers, but the dollar amount it's the same date. It looks like it's probably matched, but we're going to point that out to you. So you're going to have potentially some show up in there, and then the bottom ones should be ones we can ignore because they directly tie through, as you can see. So if you get stuck on that, certainly a tool to try to save you some time. And so I did spoke before. I knew it wasn't quite right. I was thinking of bank rec, not fixed asset. But you can see here, sales, purchasing, inventory, and bank rec for the options of what you can tie this up for. So hopefully that's a little tool if you need to save some time. All right, so let's jump into the modules. We're gonna go module by module here. Note down on the bottom here, there is a link. So this is going back to the GL closing procedures in Microsoft. It's the easiest way to link this document. So if you use this and go back, if you scroll down on that window, you'll eventually get to a part where it says close all of the other modules first, and you can drill back into each one of them. So this link is not just for GL, it actually goes through all of the other subledger, subledgers, the other modules as well. So note that you have the link right to the Microsoft documentation when you get the slides. Okay, so backups, super important if we're running some of these processes, especially I'm going to point out a couple of them with payroll and GL and fixed assets where we really like to have the backups there. This webinar and kind of talking about this module by module is assuming that we're going to do these all at separate times. So every one of these, I'm going to talk about a backup step. If you don't, or if you're going to run some of these together, say I'm going to do inventory GL, or sorry, inventory AR AP all together. Typically, it's okay to do one backup, do those three, and then if we need to grab a backup after, we can do that. But again, we're going to kind of talk through this like we're doing all the modules at a little bit different time, just to remind you to take that backup. Why do I say especially GL super important? GL is moving all of your transactions literally into different tables during that process. So if something happens, your computer locks up, your power cuts out, whatever might happen during that time, it's going to be in some other state of, halfway between two different tables for the open year and the historical, and you're going to have to deal with that. So really need those backups before we do that in particular, again, calling out that financial module here. So I'll also just mention, the backups are best to talk with who's doing your support typically. So if you are, if your IT is doing that, they typically have a way to run that most efficiently. If your partner is helping with that, if we're helping with that, we can certainly set that up to help you with that. But super important to get that backup taken care of the SQL database so that we have a spot to roll back to if we need to. So I think I mentioned that enough. We'll mention it a couple more times though. All right, so order of closing. So this is a recommended order of closing. Not everybody uses all of the modules, so certainly can ignore that if you're not. We'll also talk about some of these are optional. It's really not going to cause a problem if we miss some of these. So so we'll talk through this, but inventory is typically closed right away after your last transaction is posted for the year. So that might be at the end of the day, maybe on the 1st if somebody's not taking the day off, or before people start on the 2nd, or however that falls this year, which I haven't looked ahead. But usually we take care of the inventory right away. Receivables and payables, typically, the goal is to do it before anything is posted into the new year. So we close it then, and we'll explain that. And then some of these other ones, fixed assets, general ledger, and payroll has a little bit different sequence there. So we'll talk about them as we go through the modules. So let's jump into inventory. So who should run this? This is kind of a layout that we'll have on all of these slides here. This is really for anybody using the inventory module. And what it really does here is it resets some of those summary windows. So that inquiry window on the item where we're looking at quantity sold, it resets that for the year. So that's really a year-to-date number. With that, it zeroes out the beginning quantities for the year, which is kind of a hidden field though. But what that does is that allows us to run some of the turnover reports and things like that. So we'll talk about some of those, but it's really geared towards reporting and being able to run those accurately. There's some other options. We'll point those out as we want. So this is just kind of a summary slide, and let's jump in. So one of the things really important with that is, we need accurate numbers, obviously. And we sometimes need to run the reconcile here for quantity. So some folks do that throughout the year, and if we see something off, or just run that as kind of a maintenance task. But we surely want to make sure, especially if we're going to do a year-end physical, we want to make sure all the GP numbers are accurate before we go and do any of those adjustment entries at the end of the year for a physical. So so what we do, usually this happens kind of ahead of time, because we can't run all of this. If you're doing a lot of inventory, a lot of times you can't run this all together. So we go ahead and run this as close to year end as we can, but typically grab a backup before, have people out of the system, because it will not reconcile if documents are being edited. But then we go ahead and complete the inventory reconcile. So there is a step to run the sales order processing and purchase order processing reconciles as well first. Usually those go pretty quick, and then run the inventory. The inventory one can take a while if you have a lot of numbers. So if you're in that situation, if you have a lot of item numbers, you probably know about that already. So plan accordingly that this process could take a while. I also want to make sure to point out there's this include item history. This only has an effect if you've changed like decimal places, like if you've done some item updates, setup updates. So uncheck that to save the time, because it really doesn't have to do with your on-hand quantities, because those are all posted transactions anyways. So when we're doing this, unless we're doing that for like a setup reason, uncheck that so we save the time. Otherwise, we want to run this. Again, it will take a while for some. Just make sure we plan enough time to be able to do that. Okay. So then we talk about some of the steps here. Most companies decide to do a physical inventory at the end of the year here, of some sort. Maybe you've been doing some cycle counting or things like that, so you just have a smaller list, or else a lot do a full physical at the end of the year. So again, run that reconcile first to make sure it's accurate, and then perform that stock count. So I don't have all of the steps here for stock count, because I know there's different ways to do it, right? Some people use the actual stock count process in GP, which works well for them. Others use a printout of some sort of the quantities and just make adjustment entries for those that change. So whatever works for you. If you haven't done that and have questions, again, specific to you, we are happy to discuss that, but usually stick with what works best for you. And then once we have our stock count all entered and posted, we just want to make sure everything is posted for the year. So we're finishing the year. If you have sales transactions, invoices that are, for 12/31, get that batch posted. Any purchasing receipts, so anything that involves inventory, get that posted. At that point, in this reports here is coming from Microsoft's recommendations. So these have been around for years, but those are the list of reports that it's recommended for Microsoft to run. So I also say not everybody uses all of those reports. So I just encourage you to review that list. The stock status is typically one though that, save that, print it to a PDF so you have it. The historical one also works, but usually takes a little longer, and some other reasons that you may want to just save that stock status of the way you run it. So that one for sure. The other ones kind of optional, but review what's needed for you. Okay, so now we're ready to close. We've done all that. We're going to make a backup first, like we've talked about, and at this point we're going to run this year-end closing process. So we are going to pick between these items, and we'll talk about these real quick here. We're going to then close the fiscal period for inventory, at least when that's done, and then make another backup when it's done, just to carry forward here. So let's talk about the items. I'm going to try to go through these quick here. The options here though, so you have these to check. You can remove discontinued items. So if they're discontinued, if they're not on any transactions, we can go ahead and remove those items. There's some reasons here we can't if it's on a kit, bill of materials. So if you need to and want to, you can do that. We can remove some of the lot attributes in here as well. So if you're using lot tracking and you want to get rid of some of all the sold lot attributes, you don't need those anymore for some reason, you can go ahead and mark that, and that'll just essentially remove them from the database. And we can also remove some of the sold receipts and the cost change history. So it's going to that receipts table in GP and clearing it out as of a date that you see down here that you would pick. So I go through that really quickly. My recommendation typically is if we want to do some cleanup, I like to do that at a separate time where we're really focused on that and leave this to the year-end closing process. So I usually don't use these options, but if you have or you know they work for you exactly for that, certainly a good reason to do so. All right, and last, if you are using standard cost, this gives you the option at kind of the start of the new year, get your standard costs updated. So you can go ahead and do that, and your current cost will be transferred into the standard cost. So you might also have a process then to go through, maybe you upload it. This is one that potentially, if you know what you're doing, you can use a SQL script to put that in at the current cost, and then allow this process to make it the standard cost. So for some that are doing that and kind of doing that change right at the beginning of the year, it does work well to run this as part of the process. Okay, so again, this is a summary, kind of mentioned this at the beginning here. It's transferring the summarized current year now to a historical year. It's updating those item beginning quantity fields, so quantity sold is getting zeroed out so they can be used on the reports that are mentioned there. So the turnover report is probably the most common there. And I already mentioned quantity sold. And again, remember, it'll remove that information if you mark those. So that is gone once you mark it and run the process. So it's just kind of a last summary there. And so you have this here to kind of circle back. It's everything that we talked about. So kind of a little checklist here if you have the slides and want to just make sure you're going through all these. So let's keep moving. Let's jump into receivables. So I think everybody likes getting paid and making money, so that's a good thing. Again, the summary slide to start out here. I'll mention this for receivables and payables. So the primary thing that's being done for receivables and payables is setting the amount since last closed fields on the inquiries or on like the smart list fields if you pull those into reports. So a lot of folks ask, like, is it mandatory? I've had a lot of questions like, we've never closed receivables and payables. Is that okay? Yes, it is okay. It does not affect your financials at all. It really affects those couple of windows. So, if you haven't run that, don't worry, don't panic. It's fine as long as the biggest thing is if you are using those or unsure if you're using those fields that are the amount since last close, like if that's on a smart list and you're using that report for something to, tie out numbers or, just look at your sales values or whatever, we want those to be accurate. So we just have to be really careful about that part and make sure those aren't being used. But otherwise, this again doesn't tie into like your closing. It also, for payables, when we get into it, is not tied to 1099. So we're going to move through this. Here's actually the screenshot of what I just mentioned. So this is on the customer yearly summary inquiry window, where the amount since last closed is only whenever this is run. The fiscal and calendar year options in here are completely based on the entries and the dates that are entered in there for the document dates. So again, it's just the one option where this affects it. So a couple of tips though, some things to think about for year end. For receivable side here, customer maintenance. Do you need to, kind of clean up your customer lists? Maybe this is something you've been thinking about. It's at least a time for us to share it. Sean got a hold of the slides here and oops, I couldn't click on it, and put Sean Rocks in here as the new customer ID. So we'll talk to him later about that. But we have a tool here in case you've been saying, oh, I know I want to get some cleanup done. Here's a reminder at year end. We can run this combiner and modifier tool. So maybe two customers merged during the year and we need to combine them, or we just want to change it because they had a name change. So you can see that under utilities. You can go ahead and run that. Again, not tied to your year-end process, just kind of a little cleanup reminder right now. Write-offs. So sometimes we want to get rid of all the little dollar amounts that are hanging out there. Year-end's a good time to clean it, get them off the books here. So this one is an example, again, under sales routines, write-off documents. And you can see here we've got the limit at $10 over on the right-hand side. And what it does is if we put that in there, we can filter. You can see the filter in here right now is for our Aaron Fitz customer, but you can run this for all. And when you click that preview button down on the bottom, it'll show you the list before it does anything. So you can go ahead and see what that would write off. But if you know you've got some small amounts hanging out there and you want to get those all cleaned off, you don't have to do that individually with credit memos. This will essentially create that and apply that credit memo for you so that you don't have to do that individually. So a nice little year-end cleanup here if we've got those small amounts hanging around. Same thing with refunds. So if we do need to refund some dollar amounts, this is a setup here with basically you link your customer to a vendor and allow us to cut an AP check out to that customer then. So if they have a credit balance and we want to get that balanced out, again, year end's a good time to get that off the books. You can see the steps here under sales and under transactions. We have the refund checks that we can go ahead and get that entered. I've gotten questions as I've presented this other times. If you don't see this option in here and you've been using, most of the time it's because you've been using GP for a while and it's not turned on like in your registration. Everybody owns this. Not everybody has it turned on. So it's something super easy. If you don't see this refund checks option in there, it's just something that needs to be selected in your system registration by one of your GP admins. All right, so a good way there again to kind of clear that off the books. So what do we want to do? Just kind of the summary here. We want to post everything from last year, not post the new year. Again, what we're aiming for is to have that amount since last closed be accurate so that it has everything for 2024 and beyond in there. So we post everything that needs to be, and then we run the process. So where is that? It's under sales routines, year-end close. You can see the window that's up there. We can do this for fiscal or calendar year. So right now, you would choose your calendar if your fiscal is on a different period. Otherwise, we can do both. And it does tell you the last time it was closed. So even if you just want to navigate to this window, have you been closing it in the past or not? You can see the last time it was closed there. And it'll give you just a little bit of summary report at the end that you can print with it. So again, typically grab a backup, go ahead and run the process here, and you can print that report and you will be all finished. Again, typically we recommended to make a post closing backup here. This one is kind of one of the smaller ones. So if you forget that, I think you'll be okay on this one, but always best to use the backup. So kind of a simple one there. Purchasing is almost the same. I already mentioned what it does. We want to essentially post last year or 2023. We want to wait to post 2024 until after, and then we close it. So I'm going to keep moving quickly through this one. You can see here just the vendor yearly instead, same exact thing. It amounts, the amount since last closed is what is updated, not the fiscal or calendar year. And again, those same fields that show up here are potentially on smart lists. So we want to make sure we're using the right ones if you haven't closed. All right, little reminder, because I showed you receivables earlier, we can reconcile payables if you need to tie out to the trial balance in GL. So just a little reminder there. And vendor maintenance. So we can do the same thing as customers. We need to combine or change some customer IDs. We can certainly do that. The only difference here is under utilities for purchasing, it's called vendor combiner and modifier, works the same way, before and after, or which two we're merging into are done right from that window. So the one thing for this, if you are, the note on the bottom, if you're running 1099s here though, and you do have that combined, like one buys out another and you're reporting on that together, do that before, because it's going to roll all those transactions together. So this one might be a little bit more important if it's a 1099 vendors or multiple that you're rolling. Okay, so let's talk about 1099s here a little bit. 1099s are not connected to the year-end process in terms of, again, if you're not closing the payables module, it doesn't matter, or it's not required. So you can still run your 1099s for any year. They're two different processes in GP. So the year-end update, again, has the lines. So it's needed for that. If you're going to use one of those electronic filing options, then typically you don't need the year-end update for that if you're using a third-party one. So kind of have the note in there as if you're printing those, but if you're not, again, it's would be optional that you can use those third-party options there. Okay. So let's talk about editing 1099. Want to kind of go through what those few options are here. So editing the vendor 1099 information. So this is under purchasing and 1099 details. So this is just a summary window. I'm going to point it out that it's here. This is more to me. Actually, let me. I'm going to go into that window coming up here. So I'm going to switch to the next slide because I do have more detail. I'm not going to read all of these. Again, you'll have the slides so you can look at those. The first one we're going to actually talk about is the utilities in the detail window here. Under utilities, update 1099 information. This is kind of a mass update, so you want to be really careful with this. This one is showing by my cursor there the vendor ID that we're filtering for, because what this is going to do on the left side from, it's going to switch all of those to the 2. So this one going from miscellaneous to dividend, and it's just going to go into anything that it matches and update those types. So if we know we have a whole lot of them to do, and you know, we can put those filters in and apply that. So it's a good way to do bulk. If we don't have as many, I kind of like the ones that are a little more visible in front of me, which brings me to the next screen, which is under purchasing, edit 1099 transaction information. And that's under transactions. So this is my most common way that I like to go about it, if again, it's a reasonable amount, is that this shows all of the transactions here. And I can go ahead and switch the types or even the box number here. So you can see that information in front of us. We can go ahead and make those changes on a transaction level. If you know, something like this, where I like it is, you know, we've got less than 10 transactions. I can click, you know, a few times to make those change. I see it, I hit process on the top, and then the 1099 amount is updated for it. So I kind of like to see those if there's not a lot of transactions. The last one is under the cards here, 1099 details. So this is just kind of that summary level. What it rolls up to, what those previous 2 windows would have done is update this summary information. But say we rolled in a new company this year, or somehow didn't have that transaction information behind it, we can certainly update the information right in this window. Or some other reason that you just want to do the summary and not at the transaction level. So I'd advise transaction level if they're in there. This is kind of another option here just to get the totals entered, again, under cards. Okay, so at that point, you know, we've got our accurate information for 1099 amounts. We can go ahead and print our 1099s. Again, less than 10 is the cutoff though this year to be able to file that way. So that is under routines and print 1099s. And we also have our 1096 form in here as well. So you can see, you know, we have our information here. So again, 18.6, you will get the lines printed out, and we can go ahead and print those right from here. The edit list, if you need to tie out the totals, you can come in here and print the edit list. The actual forms are going to be off this button. So that gets a little, they've kind of cleaned that up over the years. It actually says, you know, a little more descriptive here, but yeah, just know which one you're looking at. All right, so when we're all done, the simple closing, again, this going back to the closing part here, not 1099s. So we want to update that since last closed. We go under our routines. Again, fiscal or calendar year option, and we can close the year. We want to make a backup before we run that process. All right, so I know time's moving along quickly. We have that recap you can come back to. So I'm going to jump into fixed asset here. And so this is really for anybody using fixed assets. I'm going to keep moving through the summary because we're going to cover this detail. A couple things about fixed asset. I mentioned the timing was different. You can close it before the GL. You can close it after the GL. So there is flexibility with that. Note here, a big one, you can't undo a fixed asset close though. So we want to make sure we're going through the process here that we fully depreciate it for the year, and that we can do that, that we know we're done with fixed assets before we close that year for the fixed assets. So what does that mean? First thing we want to, going through the process here, we want to print any reports that we have for the current year. I think the website does have some recommendations on that. Mainly here, the depreciation ledger is called out, where we can do that as of the close of the year there. So you can see that circled. So save those reports, easy enough to print those to PDF and just save them somewhere with your year-end closing reports. And There now are some historical reports there. So some of those are in SSRS. So if you're not using those SQL Server reporting services that are in your web browser, do advise to look for those. There are some reports that are only available there on the fixed asset ledger. So kind of a call out for the SSRS side. So moving along though to get through everything, a few checklist items here that are important though. We want to verify that our next year is set up. A lot of times calendars are set up way into the future, so that's okay. But the calendars and the quarters also need to be set up. We want to make sure to make our backup here, which is really important with these to make sure it backs up, especially if you have a lot of assets. But really for anybody, we want to do the backup here. And we run the closing process. Super important, as I called out before, I'm going to mention it one more time, is to make sure we're depreciated all the way to the last of the year. It will give you some messages, but we want to make sure that that is done. And then when we're finished, we make one more backup for it. So again, a recap here. One of the notes in the earlier one too, I know I'm moving along a little quickly here, but we can close the GL that we're going to talk about here. We can do the fixed asset closing, and then we can post back into last year. So if you need to do that, that's where some of this timing can vary a little bit. So you know, I have fixed asset listed here. It doesn't necessarily have to be done before the GL, like I mentioned. So there's your checklist with the closing for fixed assets. Let's jump into financials. So financial module, really all of them again, but financial backup, make sure to back up. I've been working with GP a long time, like I mentioned, have had to restore backups from during the fiscal year close before. So you have to have a backup. We do not want to be a situation where you're not backed up for it. So I can't reiterate that enough. So let's jump into the details here. We'll cover this. There are some important steps here that we want to go through and do. So the first thing, let's print an account list and verify account types. Usually that means not necessarily print physical, but run a smart list. Make sure your P&L accounts are set up as P&L, your balance sheet are balance sheet. So just sort those, look at the posting types or set up two different ones and verify the wrong ones don't show up in the, you know, based on the main account number filter, doesn't show up as the wrong type, because that will mess up your closing. So we want to make sure to do that. We're going to talk about the general ledger setup window as well to make sure that is all set properly. And then we do recommend to print some reports before we do that. And then last, we do have to make sure our new fiscal year is set up. Probably everybody has that done already. If not, a good time to go out right away and just make sure next year is set up and your fiscal year set up. So whoever does that. And then backup, 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 and then we'll run the process. So let's jump into the settings here. So this is that general ledger setup window. There are a couple of things to check. Some of these should probably never be changed, but always a good time to just double check it here. So we're under financial setup, general ledger. Maintain history, accounts and transactions. Typically, if you use budget transactions, I mark that as well. But those, we need to make sure those are checked here so that we maintain all history. Again, storing in SQL, there's no reason not to save that data. So we want to make sure those are checked. We have a call out in that posting to history here so that I could talk about the fact that, again, if you close the financial because you need to run reports for the next year, we can come in and mark this that says allow. So I can now post like my fixed asset closing entry or an adjustment entry, and then come back in here and uncheck it and save it that way to not make a mistake and post back into the wrong year. The fiscal period does have to be open to do that, but you don't have to wait to close your year until those last couple of entries are in there. You can close the year and make that adjustment entry a little bit later down the road and still be able to run reports and everything. So I'd like to call that out. I'm going to also call out this retained earnings. If you close to a divisional account, if you mark this, you can pick which segment that's for, and then it'll adjust that, whichever segment it is, for that divisional account. We want to make sure we actually have an account in here. So the other thing with that divisional, if you do that, you have to make sure that account, so 30/30 in our instance for retained earnings, exists in every divisional account combination that's there. So I want to make sure that we don't have that out of sync. All right, so 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to move through to get through payroll and see if we have any questions here. So here's a smart list example. We're just looking for balance sheet accounts that are in the wrong part of the account segment, the main account segment there. So you can see some examples. Really important to make sure those are accurate and not take a whole bunch more time. And then, so what happens if you don't do that though, right? So if we close the year and found out one of our P&L accounts or more than one were set up as balance sheet, so it rolled that balance forward, we don't want to make a GL entry to adjust for that because that just will never look the same on your financials. In the year-end closing window, we have the reverse historical year. Make sure to make a backup before you do that. And it basically is an undo. So it basically moves all those transactions back into the open and then allows you to make a change to those account types in this example and then close the year again. So the one new feature in this in 18.6 now that I mentioned earlier or was on the list earlier is that before we always had to get out of all GP companies to run this reversal. Now it's just for that specific company. So that's what the enhancement is this year, makes it a little bit easier for those with multi-companies. But if you do those first steps, hopefully you never have to run this. But if you do reverse the historical year, it'll also tell you to reconcile your general ledger. So that's usually a super fast process, but we run that for the most recent opened year. And then you can make the changes and then reclose the year again. So again, if we mess that up, we want to use that reverse. Okay, so then we get into the actual year-end closing. So we're under routines. Here's a couple of things. Again, double check our retained earnings account. The journal entry should be the next number, not a big deal, just leave that alone. And then typically, I don't like to remove unused segment numbers. Again, I'll clean that up as a separate time, so I usually leave that unchecked. And then we want to maintain inactive accounts and all inactive accounts. Again, I don't want it removing any accounts on me. It's not going to remove ones that that have balances anyways, but I don't, I might be intending to use those in the future, turn those on. So I don't like to do that cleanup then. But if it does, I've helped some folks with that just to validate everything's okay. It typically is just creating more work if you have to re-add some accounts. So make sure your settings are right though, that you choose, and then we run that close year. We do have a progress bar. It's going to go through several steps here. Just be patient, especially if it gets to the point where it's moving those entries between tables. It takes a little while. So let that run, let that finish. Be sure to print that year-end closing report when it's done. Print it to PDF, print a hard copy, do both. It's the only time that nicely formatted version of it is available. Otherwise, you just have to kind of grab the GL entries that are out there, and it just doesn't have that nice format. Okay, so there's our recap there. One other note about GL, so if we're rolling through and you're using Management Reporter, we need to close the year to be able to run the balance sheet type because the beginning balance doesn't roll forward until we run the closing. So we do want to do that. And then don't forget to, if you're doing budgets and you have a new budget ID for the new year, just make sure that you switch that so you're running your reports accurately the next year. All right, so I didn't leave a lot of time for payroll. So let's jump in here right away. So payroll, not much has changed from last year. Again, there are not new calculations, so not required to install the year-end update. So let's make sure we hit the important parts. So software update is, again, not required this year. The typical, I left this in here kind of a normal, is that you do not, you don't have to wait till your last payroll is run typically, so and that applies this year as well, right? So you can apply the year-end update right now, whether there were changes or not coming for the new year. It's all set to run it now. We do still have to make sure our tax rates are right. So I haven't looked in the last day or two here. I think the middle of the month is when the new tax rates, especially for like states and where it's needed, are coming out. So we want to make sure we're on the 2023 tax rates, tax tables, and not on the 24. I always watch the blogs from Microsoft. Terry Healy puts those out. So if we want to update right now before those new ones come out, and then update the tax rates after we've finished our W-2. So let's jump into that, or at least creating our year-end wage file, which is the next slide. So the year-end wage file can be created as many times as you want though. So if you want to start reviewing information right now, if you wanted to do this back in July, whenever that is, you can run this year-end wage file. So run the process that we're going to talk about, go and review the data. The next time you run it, it's going to have the warning on the right is saying that it's going to delete it. What it's going to do is essentially clear the table and repopulate it. So that's okay when we're doing this to check it at one time and run it again. So run this as much as you want, get ahead of kind of tying things out. Go ahead and run that right now. So with that, closing the payroll module, here is a summary. We're gonna kind of jump through these as quick as I can here right now. So this is the process here to create that year-end wage file. So it's under routine, year-end closing. And we're going to go ahead. Oops, sorry. I thought I had a couple more slides there. I'm going to back up then. So we are going to go ahead and create that year-end wage file here. We want to run all of our reports first, or as we're going through this process. So we want to run our monthly, quarterly, annually reports, and make sure all of that is completed before we go ahead and obviously move forward with finishing our year-end wage file and our W-2s and everything there. So what we typically do ahead of time is get that software update applied if we need to. Again, asterisk this year that we don't necessarily need that. We're going to make sure we're still on the 2023 rates, and we can check that under your system, under setup system and payroll taxes. So that will show you your payroll last date. So we want to make sure we're on. There were some updates at the end of November, I think is the last date right now. So so again, check those blogs that were linked earlier too. It always kind of tells you when those are updated and released. So when we get to that point, so we've got the version that we're going to run, whether you install the update or not, then we're going to create that year-end wage file that I was just talking about. We're going to then we want to save that. So as long as we run that wage file, if we kind of save at that point, you can verify the information, you can edit it in that window, and if needed, and print those at any point in time. When that wage file gets created, that is when it's using those tax rates. So that is the important part here with tying this all together. So we can also, I've had folks make a backup at that time and kind of save that, so we have that set aside, so we can verify that all that information is correct and save it here. So we go through all of our, kind of verifying, making sure that's all right. We can actually create our W-2s then when we're done, and create, a post-closing backup here as well. So I apologize, I thought I had a couple more slides here to detail this out, but apparently kind of lost those in the mix here. So it does call out here the wage file. We do have the checklist here, so a little bit more organized there. Threw myself off a little bit with those slides, but we do have the recap here just to make sure you're kind of doing these all in order and checking the boxes. So after we get done, yay, we got a new year. Hopefully we're celebrating the new year a little before that probably because of the timing here, but obviously a number of steps to go through here with everybody's year end. And I know we're right at time. Sean, I don't know if there's any, kind of quick questions. I do want to make sure to mention thank you again, everybody, for joining. We'll send the slides so you'll have all of those sequences and items listed there. I did want to mention too, so I know a number of folks use Integrity Data, one of the popular ISVs. I went through the payroll pretty quick here because we were running out of time. They actually have a webinar, I think it's the 13th, and they go full in depth on all of the payroll updates and details and things like that. Obviously talk about some of their solutions as part of it. But if you are looking for really detailed, experts that focus on payroll, check them out. Let me know if you want a link to it. I can send you if you haven't seen that. Otherwise, just check out their site too for payroll. So I want to say thanks again, Sean. You want to
Yeah,
jump in
John,
or anything there?
one or two questions. I was able to answer them. You'd be proud of me. I think in the chat, responded back to everyone. If you weren't able to see those, please shoot us an email. Our email is up there on the slide. I don't know if John was actually recommending that you pop a champagne bottle in the office, but hey, you do you. Once again, thanks again for joining us here at SA Global. John, thank you. Great job. We appreciate each and every one of you. Please reach out if we could be of any assistance, and we'll see you all soon.